Hi guys, my name is Christine and I'm a dating, relationship and personal development coach. And today I'm talking about why you must never get back with your ex, apart from those few very rare exceptions. And I will be going into those rare exceptions as well. So let's first get into why you should never get back with your ex, okay? So if things didn't work out the first time, it's very unlikely that things are going to work out again. Okay, that's the first thing that you need to think about and consider. And also, you need to think about, as well. And I think this really does awaken people a little bit more when it comes to their relationships and getting back with exes and them coming to the conclusion that they don't want to get back with their ex anyway. And then, as you know, think of, the last, like perhaps month or so of the relationship. Think back on that time. Because at the moment, you're probably in a place where you kind of maybe do want your ex back, or you're at that journey where you're getting over it, basically. But perhaps there may be something in the back of your mind thinking, bit of nostalgia there, looking at grass is the greener on the other side sort of thing. But, usually what happens after a breakup is one or both of the people, usually it's just one, the one that got dumped, starts to become obsessed with that relationship. Now, I don't mean obsessed as in, like crazy obsessed or something like that. I'm not talking about the guy with the white hair in The Bodyguard or something like that. But that kind of crazy obsessed. But I'm just talking about, you start to feel like, oh God, I want my ex back. I really want them back. I can't believe they dumped me. And usually when you get rejected like that and you get dumped, it kind of hurts your ego. And you kind of, in a way, feel like you want to win them back in some sort of way. Because you have this like, oh my God, I can't believe I got rejected kind of thing. I can't believe I got dumped. Me? We all sort of have that a little bit inside of us, even if we're not consciously aware of it. That's why sometimes we become obsessed when we go through a breakup and we get dumped and we think, oh no, I need to get them back. I need to get them back. I need to, because you're trying to prove something basically. But if you look back on the months leading up to, especially that last month leading up to the breakup, you got to think back on how you was actually feeling in that relationship. Now, most of the time, most cases that I found is that most people were actually unhappy as well when the breakup happened, even if they were the ones that got dumped. They were still, I think there was a lot of arguments going on basically, because usually there is if a breakup is about to happen. There was a lot of arguments. I've heard people saying that they felt like they had a lot of lack of freedom. They were feeling really sad. They'd gone off their partner. They weren't happy. They weren't attracted to them anymore. And there was just like this general feeling of unhappiness. And then the breakup happened. And then suddenly they, couldn't believe that they got dumped, basically. And they then started to look back on the relationship with nostalgia and started thinking back to those good times. Now, usually when you're going through a breakup and a breakup's happened and you've been dumped, instead of looking back on the past, like the month before the breakup, when you were miserable, when you were sad, they actually start looking at the beginning of the relationship, in the middle, those kinds of areas where things were actually relatively good and there was a lot of romance, there was a lot of passion, and things felt really, really good. And that's what usually happens. We tend to look back on certain events, especially when it comes to relationships, that we want to get back in with nostalgia, and we only think about the good things and we ignore how we felt and all the horrible feelings as well. And it's a natural thing that we do, especially at the beginning when a breakup has just happened. I remember doing this as well. Even though I was in an absolutely miserable relationship, I started thinking back on the good times, the fun, the enjoyment, the passion, those kinds of things. You do that. You can't help but do that straight away when you've just been, you've just gone through a breakup or you've been dumped or something like that. Even if you were the one that ended things, right? Sometimes that happens. You still look back on it with nostalgia and you're like, oh, I wonder if I made the right decision, or things like that. Or, I don't know if I'm going to find anyone better than my ex. I'm never going to find anyone as good looking as my ex. I'm never going to find anyone who's going to love me as much as my ex. But because we look at these things with nostalgia, often we get our vision gets clouded basically, and we fail to look at the things that went wrong. Because if I personally remember the last month of being in the relationship that I had in my early 20s, it was hell. It was hell. I was upset. I was crying nearly every day. It was awful, basically. So, and luckily I personally was the one that ended that relationship because it was so bad. So I didn't have as much. I didn't get obsessed about that relationship, basically, and I didn't ever get to a point where I really wanted my ex back. I just sometimes had the occasional like little bit of nostalgia towards it, right? As we all do when we start looking back on relationships, and we do it with a rose-colored pair of glasses instead of looking at the pain, right? So what you got to focus on is the pain, because more than likely, if you ever get back with your ex, right? If you ever get back into that relationship, it's very likely that things are just, it may be good again to begin with, but then it's slowly going to just happen again. You're slowly going to get back into those old toxic routines. You're going to get back to that point where you were unhappy, right? So those are things that you kind of need to consider if you are still one of these people that want their ex back, right? And that's one of the reasons why you should never get back with your ex, because it's more than likely just going to end up where you just break things off again with them anyway. And what I see actually a lot is, people that do successfully get their ex backs, within a few months, they dump their ex anyway, and they're like, no, you know what, this is just as bad as it was when it ended, and things haven't changed, they haven't changed. I'm just gonna end it, and then it's the dump. The one that got dumped is then the one that does the dumping, because they fought to get their ex back, they got back with their ex, they conquered that goal, and then it didn't live up to their expectations, and they ended up ending the relationship anyway. So what are the exceptions then? And I think personally, for me, from what I've seen, from my own experience of what I've seen, is that it's only a good idea to get back with your ex if perhaps everything was great. Let's say everything was wonderful, right? And there wasn't any time where, well, there was probably a few times where you may have had a little argument here and there. But, when you think back on the last month of your relationship, and everything was sort of normal, right? Everything was sort of like how a normal relationship would be. There wasn't any toxic behavior, there wasn't any crying or fits or massive arguments. You were generally happy, right? You were happy. And perhaps the breakup happened because of a huge misunderstanding or something, right? Now, there could be a different range of things what a misunderstanding could be. For example, let's say they thought that you were talking to someone else. They thought you were having a relationship with someone else, even though it was just a big misunderstanding. Let's say friends got in the way and they started playing with your relationship. Let's say you're a man watching this, and you had a girlfriend who dumped you, but let's say one of your friends went up to her and said, "Oh yeah, he's cheating on you. He's been unfaithful. We went out the other night and he cheated on you," and it was a complete and utter lie, right? Those are the sort of things that's the exception, right? If things were good, but something came between you two that tore you apart, and it could be like meddling mutual friends. It could be, just some sort of like huge misunderstanding that was completely wrong, right? And I think those are the sorts of things that are the exception. Another misunderstanding is, it usually always comes down to third party people, like family members, for example, that are trying to sabotage your relationship. It usually just comes down to third party people, or it could be a general misunderstanding where, let's say, for using that example of your partner thought that you cheated on them, but you didn't, right? Things like that. Where it's just a huge misunderstanding, or perhaps it could be like some sort of like money issue, like perhaps they thought that you had, that you spent a load of money when you didn't, or something like that, or they found, a receipt for an expensive gift and they thought it was for someone else, but you actually bought it for them and it's for their birthday or something, but they found the receipt and they think that you're having an affair, things like that, things where there's just been a huge misunderstanding, but up until that point, everything was good and you were both happy. Right, there wasn't any arguments. Of course, you may have had a few little spats, but it wasn't something that was happening every day or every other day, and you weren't sad and you weren't miserable, right? And that's what you've got to think about, and that's the exception, personally, that I think. If you have any other things that you think might be the exception where you can get back with an ex, leave them down in the comments, but this is the one that I've personally seen the most, the most common is just where there's just been a huge misunderstanding, either on one side or both sides, and they just, and then you can get back with that ex, because it's more likely that the relationship is just fine, there's nothing wrong with the relationship, you're compatible, you're happy together, but something just got in the way, and something came, or someone came in between you two. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get in touch with me personally, then please go to www.christineloveridge.com, and I shall talk to you again very soon, and thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.